ScouterStan. Want to talk about the National Jamboree. There's one coming up for scouting, scheduled for July 19th through the 28th of 2023. This is significant because it's going to be at the Summit, which is a reservation up in West Virginia. And every scout leader knows about the Summit. Make sure you sign up online for their emails. I believe they are starting to recruit staff for the event. The National Jamboree has a lot of different history to it. It really started, our National Jamboree in the United States was to commemorate the 25th anniversary of scouting. It was originally scheduled in 1935. It was scheduled to be held in that summer in Washington, D.C. in the Capitol Mall area. Now, because this is a podcast, I'm going to describe the patch. It generally is a compass-looking patch. The original patches were on felt. They did not have a border on the outside edge. And it had the Capitol Dome silhouetted in the middle. It's very colorful. A lot of reds and blues. It's just a beautiful patch. They also had neckerchiefs, a red one and a blue one. I believe the red one was for the youth. There was a full square, of course. Now, unfortunately, the 1935 National Jamboree did not take place. It was postponed because of a polio epidemic. Now, does that sound familiar? It happens. A lot of times we have to keep in mind we have youth and adults that could be vulnerable to this or any pandemic. In 1937, they decided to go ahead with the Jamboree celebrating the 25th anniversary. This was in the National Mall like it was originally planned and had about 27,000 scouts and scouters attend. The patch was updated with the Washington Monument instead of the Capitol Dome as it was in 35. The 37 Jamboree has the actual Washington Monument. It also had neckerchiefs that were red and blue with a white stripe. Now, for 13 years, they did not have a National Jamboree, and this was because of the war effort for World War II. Scouts were busy doing a lot of activities, collecting, victory gardens, all kinds of things they were doing to support the war effort. In 1950, they decided to go ahead and have another National Jamboree. This was to be held at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. The patch was to commemorate George Washington. George Washington is taking a knee and praying on the patch, and it's in his beautiful blue coat with the brown pants, and it's a beautiful patch. Harkening back to the 1937s, it also has a serrated border on the outside. Of course, it's contained within a regular sewn border so that it could be sewn on shirts easily, but the serration was to kind of remind people of the 1937 Jamboree. It too had a cotton neckerchief, but it was a single triangle. It wasn't the double triangle or a full square like it was in 37 and 35. The base was red. It had a white stripe with a blue outer edge, so that when you wore it, it was red, white, and blue down the front from the curl of the neckerchief. There's all kinds of commemorative patches for it, yellow backgrounds, different kinds of different promotions. They even had a silk scarf that was very popular as a way to get people to buy in on the Jamboree. This Jamboree had about 47,000 scouts and scouters. In 1950, they announced that they were going to have Jamborees on the East Coast and then follow up with another Jamboree on the West Coast. So the next one in 1953 was at the Irvine Ranch in California with about 45,000 scouts and scouters in attendance. The patch had a Condondaga wagon with a yellow background that gave it more of a kind of riding off into the sunset feel. All the words were written in red on a white background, and then, of course, the year was in gold in the plains of the patch with a blue border. This, too, had a very similar neckerchief with a red inner core, a white stripe, and then a blue edge, so that when it was rolled, the front of the scarf would actually come down and be in red, white, and blue. In 1957, they were back at Valley Forge, and they used the same George Washington taking a knee, praying on the patch. It was a little smaller, and it had words around it, very similar to the 1953 patch, but it was a white background. It was also one of the first Jamborees to actually introduce what is known as a leather backpack patch. This East Coast Jamboree had about 52,500 scouts and scouters in attendance. The 1960 Jamboree was the 50th anniversary of scouting in the United States. It went all gold. The emblem was gold, the patch background was gold, red was used to highlight it more, and of course it had the years on there. The theme was for God and country. The neckerchief was a gold center with a white stripe just below a red stripe and a blue edge. Again, the gold, the red, white, and blue was all twirled together when the scarf was on the front of the scout. It had all kinds of patches leading up to the 50th anniversary for this Jamboree. There are many highly collectible patches for this particular Jamboree. And of course it had the ever so coveted leather backpack patch. This Jamboree was in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and had 56,000 scouts and scouters in attendance. In 1964, they moved the Jamboree back out east. And there again, it was at Valley Forge. Being at Valley Forge, they had the same George Washington on the logo. And for the first time, the patch that the attendees wore was not round. Before the Jamboree, the patch was actually silk. And then when they went to the Jamboree, it was fully embroidered. Patch collectors often refer to the backing as being a paste back, but this is not true for the silk version of that patch. It also had, for the first time, a metallic threading on the scout emblem, the fleur-de-lis. It had a lot of promotion before it was going for the Jamboree. They even had a white silk embroidered scarf. Now, this Jamboree had about 51,000 scouts and scouters in attendance. In 1969, the National Jamboree moved out west. The Farragut State Park was chosen in Idaho. The patch set was incredible. The design had a deer with antlers on a slope overlooking mountains. The color scheme was kind of yellow, green, and gold. It, too, also had a fleur-de-lis that used metallic threads, fully embroidered on the patch that was worn by the scouts at the event. The scarf was primarily yellow, and then it had a border of green and gold. This Jamboree had 43,000 scouts and scouters. The 1973 Jamboree was completely different. Instead of going to the East Coast, they decided that they were going to have an East and a West at the exact same time, so that more scouts could travel to it without an extreme expense. Now, this was interesting because during the 70s, of course, we had our gas crisis. So traveling became extremely unstable and expensive. The Eastern Jamboree was at the Moraine State Park in Pennsylvania, whereas the West was at the Farragut State Park in Idaho. Combined, they had 73.6 thousand scouts and scouters in attendance. The Jamboree is a square patch featuring a tree with a sun setting behind it with a red, white, and blue banner across it. It has the fleur-de-lis on there, of course, and it says National Jamboree 1973. There are a lot of collectible patches, and a lot of times these were addition to the patch that was worn. The scarf or neckerchief actually was a blue center with the logo as a square on the back. The edge was red, white, and blue, so that when it was worn, it shone on the front of the scarf. It was red, white, and blue descending from the collar down. Now, in 1977, it was decided that they would only have one Jamboree on the East Coast, and this was to be held at Moraine State Park in Pennsylvania. This Jamboree was 1 year after the bicentennial of America. The scarf was distinguished by having a white center, a red side, and a blue side, so that it was red, white, and blue when worn on the front. It was red, white, and blue on the back with a compass. That was the logo, the compass pointing north. And of course, there's a lot of different patches that were added on to the logoed patch that they wore. There were 28.6 thousand scouts in attendance at this Jamboree. In 1981, they had the first of many Jamborees being held at Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia. For the next 7 Jamborees, this would be the location. There were 29,000 in attendance of scouts and scouters at this event. In 1985, 1988, 1989, 1993, 1997, 2001, 2005, and 2010 were all held in this location. Now, since the 100th anniversary in 2010, now all of the National Jamborees are to be held at the Summit Scout Reservation in West Virginia. That is amazing history about Scouting's National Jamboree held in the United States. And it's amazing all of the different things. Now, we've gone through an epidemic and cancellations and postponements of the National Jamboree in the past and quite recently. So the next Jamboree that's coming up in 2023, make an effort to go visit, to attend, to be on staff, help out, what have you. But recognize that a National Jamboree is when all councils throughout the United States get together and have fun and scout fellowship together. And in that spirit, here is the Scoutmaster's joke. How do you fix a broken pumpkin? With a pumpkin patch. Oh, I am so sorry. But like I said, these are jokes you could tell at scout meetings. So feel free to go right ahead. Of course, some of the scouts may say, hey, feel free not to. So it's up to you. But it's meant to have fun. And that's what scouting is all about. And I thank you so much for what you do in scouting. So keep up that good work. And I will see you on the trail.